It's the Underdogs back with you for an action-packed episode during a prime time in the sports calendar. I am Jordan Brenner, joined as always by Peter Keating. Peter, how are you handling all the sports?
I'm turning to drink, Jordan. I have my New York's. This glass is so old. It says National Baseball League New York Professional Team. This glass was made before the Mets had a name, and I found it in my parents' basement. So I've turned to drink.
Well, let's pour one out for your Mets. It was a good run, a lot of excitement, a lot of fun, a lot of purple characters who became rallying icons.
It
Good show,
was
sir.
a good ride. A good ride. Anytime, anytime McDonald's adopts you for its marketing, it's pretty good. But also, I think this might mean Pete Alonso stays in New York. We won't have to get sidetracked into talking about this, but some moments make a difference, off and on the field. I think he might be. I think he was ready to pack his bags. I think he's ready to unpack them now.
Well, for your sake, I hope you're right. Peter, a little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about a real surprise that's arguably been the best team in the NFL by some metrics, and a division that might be on the verge of making history. But first, there's a little event called the World Series beginning this Friday, and it's featuring those noted underdogs, the Los Angeles Dodgers and New York Yankees.
Those plucky, those plucky can-do teams, right? Yeah. Do they have the two largest payrolls in baseball? I'm pretty sure they do, right?
Well, your boy Stevie Cohn is ready to. He's paying guys $40 million a year not to be there. So,
Well, it's interesting, Jordan. I mean, is it possible Ohtani was worth considerably more than he was paid this season, even though he wasn't pitching? He may have been worth more than 70 million this year. It's crazy.
so we like to talk about why unlikely things happen on this podcast, and even though it is the two best teams meeting in the World Series, that is somewhat unlikely given all we've talked about the randomness of baseball's play. So it's, to me, it's kind of refreshing that we're getting two teams of this quality emerging from the randomness of short series. And I'm, not just because I happen to be a fan of one of these two teams, I'm really looking forward to this matchup. It's checking all the boxes.
There's always a point in the NCAA tournament, right, where it gets a little like it's fantastic that underdogs win early, right? But by the time they get to the Sweet 16 or later, you want the season to have meant something for the really good teams and the best players, right? And you eventually want to see great teams playing for a championship. That's finally what's happened in baseball. We've had a lot of well, not almost random teams popping up deep into the postseason recently, right? Now you have the best teams in each league facing off, and then a lot of history behind it too. So yeah, it's cool.
So we're not breaking this down from, say, an upset perspective, but it is really interesting. And first of all, we've talked a lot about how there aren't many indicators of a team's postseason success in baseball, but to the degree that you can find anything, the old sort of adage of pitching and defense has sort of gone by the wayside, especially starting pitching. And we've seen it with these teams. They're hitting the hell out of the ball, and
Mm-hmm.
their bullpens, particularly the Dodgers, because they don't even have enough healthy starting pitchers, have been crucial. And that's sort of the way postseason baseball goes now.
To the extent we can find anything that matters, we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
OPS plus, your on base plus slugging compared to the league, adjusted for your home field, is the key metric. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean hitting is more important than pitching. It means when you look at stats on the team level at this time of year,
Yeah.
teams' hitting stats represent more of the lineup you're going to see than their overall pitching stats. There are teams that 40% of the innings thrown are by pitchers who won't even appear in the postseason, right? That's just not true about teams with their lineups. And the Dodgers were number one in OPS plus, and the Yankees are number four. I'll tell you something interesting, Jordan. The more you look at this, the more you see two very high payroll teams spend a lot of money to build their clubs according to the best. They basically bought the best players or developed the best players that analytics can buy. It's not just that the Dodgers are first in OPS plus, the Yankees are fourth. It's not just that if you look at how many offensive runs they created, the Dodgers are first, the Yankees are fourth. If you look at their isolated power, the Dodgers are first, the Yankees are third. If you look at batting average, they're both in the top 10. If you look at their walk rate, okay, the Yankees are first, the Dodgers are third in all of baseball. You have two teams engineered in very similar ways. Their offenses are engineered in very similar ways and at the top
Yes.
of the heap.
Well, I think a lot of this is going to come down to walks because both of these teams have absolutely grinded opposing pitching staffs to death in the postseason. You said the Mets, I think, issued a record number of walks against the Dodgers. The
Yeah.
Yankees, in both series against the Royals and the Guardians, walk, taking their walks, getting people on base, and then hitting big home runs with people on base. Now, what's interesting to me from that perspective is this: you used to think about starting pitching as who can shut a team down. Let's flip that a little bit. Let's not think of which team has enough starting pitchers to, or the old days of Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, who can just dominate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which starting pitchers can pitch well enough to give them enough innings so they don't expose the bullpen game after game after game after game? So, for instance, I'm looking at Gerrit Cole for the Yankees and not saying he's got to give them 7 innings of one-run baseball, but if he can give them 7 innings, period, where they don't have to go to the bullpen early. And you saw what happened late in that series when Luke Weaver got overused and gave up a couple home runs, where Clay Holmes got overused and gave up a couple big hits. Same thing true of the Dodgers, right? Who, to me, Peter, that's the biggest thing. Whose starting pitchers can give them enough innings to avoid the sort of penalty of matchup overexposure?
So just to put an underline on why that's so important, we started.
Do you agree with me?
Well, I think the question is structured to favor the Yankees as an answer because there are no Dodgers starting pitchers who can last long enough and miss enough bats to answer that question in favor of the Dodgers. And meanwhile, what you've seen out of Rodon and Luis Gil also when he's not walking people, as well as Cole, the Yankees rotation at this point in time isn't just better than the Dodgers. It's pretty formidable. But I just want to point out one really cool stat because we started to hear a lot about how the Dodgers were classic at bat extenders and don't swing at pitch out of the strike zone team against the Mets. Now, the Mets' fundamental weakness for a long time in their pitching has been that their starters walk too many batters. The way they assembled a rotation and also guys in their bullpen was to take pretty cheap flyers on guys with pretty high walk rates and figured they could turn those dials down. And that worked really well until they met up with the Dodgers. Okay, so the Dodgers swing at only 29% of pitches outside the strike zone. And you see that with guys like Max Muncy, as well as contact guys like Edman, as well as the power hitters, right?
Sure.
The other power hitters. That's the 3rd best rate in baseball. Jordan, the Yankees are actually number 1 at 27.9%. So we reached a point where this swing percentage, a Fangraphs metric, has actually made it into the public consciousness. This is something else where the Yankees and Dodgers are both built to force you to throw strikes to them. And the starting pitching level, obviously that favors the Yankees mightily. But Jordan, one interesting thing is the Dodgers have 15 relievers this season whose stuff was above average. And if you combine the guys they're now using, Hudson, Banda, Kopech, Phillips, Trinan, and Vesia, okay, that leaves a couple of guys out who they didn't use so far in the postseason. They've combined for 32 postseason innings pitched. They've only allowed 3 runs, all in that game 6 against the Mets when the game was basically put away. Dave Roberts has done an excellent job. They gave up those runs against the Mets after the Mets had already seen them, right? And Roberts said again and again that he was trying to not expose his best relievers prematurely. He's really good at that. It's one of the few places I think managing actually makes a tactical difference. I think that Roberts is really good at shielding his best pitchers from exposure till they come in and just shut people down. I think Boone has to rely on guys who are usually pretty good, but can be shaky. And those guys get overexposed. The longer the series goes on, that's the Yankees' most vulnerable point.
I agree. And I really do believe in shifting advantages based on how often you've seen a relief pitcher. The Yankees haven't had the luxury of being able to avoid their highest leverage relievers in certain situations because their bullpen isn't as deep, because they've had injuries in the bullpen, dating back all the way to the beginning of the season with Jonathan Loáisiga. Now, what I think could be really interesting.
Look, they were right about Luke Weaver. I mean, he's still been right more often than he's been wrong.
This team is great about finding guys off the scrap heap and turning, you've said it for years, and turning them into valuable relievers. It's probably what Brian Cashman does best and the staff does best. Now, one thing that I think could change the dynamic is it sounds like Nestor Cortes is likely to be on the roster. And he's a guy who has relief experience, pitched a great game earlier this year. He went about 4 innings out of the bullpen. The Yankees have had two problems with their relief core. One, they don't have a lot of guys they trust necessarily out of their top 3 or 4. Two, none of them, except for Weaver, who's the closer, are really built to go multiple innings. Well, if you can use Nestor Cortes as a higher leverage 2 to 3 inning pitcher, maybe 3 times over the course of a 7-game series, he's a good pitcher. B, it avoids having to use some of those guys over and over. I think it shifts the dynamic, especially if he's pitching behind a guy like Luis Hill, who, as you mentioned, is wild, probably can't go more than 5 innings. But if you look at that as a piggyback situation, I think it changed the dynamic. I think Nestor Cortes, if he's on the roster and if the elbow doesn't flare up again, could be a difference maker in the series.
Look, if he's on the roster, you could do a couple of things. You could piggyback him with Luis Hill the way the Mets tried to do with Senga and Peterson, and worked once, didn't work after that. But also, you do have rest days because of travel in the 7-game series. And Cole is a bulldog, and Rodon is too. And I really wonder if Schmidt and Cortez, if everyone except the top 3 guys making Hill the number 3 starter should just be in the bullpen and you go with a 3-man rotation. I wonder if maximizing the number of innings available in the bullpen might not be the best way to go.
I think Schmidt's been really good and a little bit unlucky in his 2 starts. And there's a reason why he started game 3 of both series over Hill. He's more reliable at this point. So I wouldn't do that. But Peter, I'm just excited. Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Soto, Muncy, Betts, on and on and on. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, well, just take it from somebody who was rooting for the Mets in 2015 when Lucas Duda's throwing arm turned out to be the difference in a series. Watch out for the weaknesses. The Yankees are the worst base runners in baseball. The Yankees have Jazz Chisholm at third and Birdie at first base sometimes.
Rizzo's back. It's fine.
I mean, you got to just
Rizzo's the one making the errors.
Watch out for the worst case scenario as much as we're going to enjoy the best.
All right. Well, I am going to enjoy all of it. Go Yankees, but respect to the Dodgers. And we'll be back with some NFL right after this.